Hi everyone, I'm Christy and I'll be reading the Bible for us tonight. If you would open with me to Ecclesiastes 1. Everything is meaningless. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What do people gain from all their labours at which they toil under the sun? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again, what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was here already long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. Wisdom is meaningless. I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, look, I have increased in wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I have experienced much of wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. But I learned that this too is a chasing after the wind. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief.
Thanks for reading that so well, Christy. Do you hear the tone of the last phrase? More knowledge, more grief. Everyone at school, the Bible, it feels your pain. But did you feel like a disjunct, like something going wrong? You saw those beautiful images of like so many aspects of our lives as humans, and then the opening statements, meaningless, everything. Not just a little bit, all of it. The Bible's saying is meaningless. It's a bit jarring. So we're going to think about how do you make sense of that? What do you do with that statement that everything is meaningless? Let's ask God's help and then we'll talk about it. Father God, thank you for the Bible, and we ask that you'd speak to us now, that your Spirit would help us discern how to make sense of this. And more importantly, we ask that you would open us up to the journey you want to put us on, where we might find what it means to make sense, not just of those words, but actually of our own lives. What's even the purpose of our lives? We ask that you would speak to us, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. A couple of months ago, Campbelltown car part shop, I met a young guy that I hadn't seen for a very long time. I used to teach his dad the piano for many years, a long time ago, and he told me his dad just passed away a few years ago. And very sad to hear that, but there was something very unique about that man. His name was Corey, and we had a very special friendship for quite a long time. He was a man who didn't fit in normal social settings. He was not just odd, but intense. And most people would say he's odd, but I think he's beautiful. But what was special about him was whatever he was struggling with, you weren't guessing about it. And I would always place his lesson on the last lesson of a Tuesday night, because after that, he had to talk what's going on in his life. Why is this not working? What's it mean to be a Christian? What's it mean to deal with all the struggles of life? And he asked the questions that you don't normally hear expressed maybe in a setting like this. He just had to say it how it was, sort of thing. Actually, his son's a little bit similar. His son is actually a very successful YouTube rap artist. And I had no idea. I could never have guessed it. He said, I'm actually doing this now. I said, really? It made sense of the very expensive car he had outside. He said, do you want me to show you? And in the middle of the car part shop, he's doing a rap for me. He's a pretty amazing character, but similar to his dad. But I don't know if this is the first time you've ever come to our church or any church. We often have a perception that what happens here is someone presents you with, say, a formula, then wanting you to sort of sign the box and agree with it, sort of sign off on that. But the book of Ecclesiastes will not fit into any sort of formula like that. It will not actually work that way. In fact, it's doing something very different. And you're going to hear things that you just heard that you don't expect to hear in a church, do you? Everything is meaningless. And actually from the Bible, do you expect to hear that? That's not what you expect. Here's some of the things it says. The rich die, the poor die, everyone dies. So what? So what's the point of trying to work hard and living? What's the point of being good? But it's actually reflecting the thoughts and the feelings that people have. But we wouldn't expect to see that at church, right? Because, we're meant to be happy all the time, of course. We all love each other, don't we? And, it's great now that we've got Jesus in our life. No, it's actually not great. It's not perfect. There's so many loose ends, aren't there? There's so many parts of our life that is confounding, that is frustrating. This book is not going to actually settle for, she'll be right, mate. It's not going to do that at all. So let's not pretend that us in the room aren't actually asking some of the questions that you just heard expressed. Listen to some of the other things this book says. The rich get richer. The poor get poorer. Evil people prosper. Tyrants reign. Disease spreads. Everyone dies and turns to dust. Life is unfair. Nothing makes sense. The whole world is twisted. And so, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. The writer's saying, so what's the point of achievement and amassing wealth and passing that on to someone else who's going to mismanage it and forget you? Big questions. And I guess we've got to start with, why the heck's this in the Bible? What's the point of this sort of writing? And so today you're going to discover some things about the book. I'm going to slow down a bit to normal, tell you some things about the nature of the structure of this book, and we're just going to walk through some of the introduction material, these first 11 verses, to prepare us to spend 7 weeks together in the book. It's one of the most important gifts to the church. James likes to highlight the difference between him and I. You'll notice it's one of my favourites because we're on a journey of discovery. I'm going to be asking questions every single week. It doesn't fit into the normal structures, and it doesn't give you actually answers the way you might think it does. It actually gives you questions. But let's make sense of this first. So can you just notice at the beginning, we're introduced to a teacher, and it says, here are the words of this teacher. And then it gives us a summary of that teacher's conclusions, the first 11 verses. He says everything is meaningless. And then I want you to notice what happens at verse 12. I'm going to just read each verse, the personal pronouns at the beginning of each verse. I, the teacher. Verse 13, I applied my mind. 14, I have seen all things under the sun. Verse 16, I said to myself, look, I've increased in wisdom. 2 verse 1, I said to myself, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Verse 3, I tried cheering myself with wine. Verse 4, I undertook great projects. I built houses. 5, I made gardens. 6, I made reservoirs. 10, I denied myself nothing. 17, so I hated life. So you see, in the first person, we've got in the introduction, someone describing a teacher in the third person, giving us a summary of what their point is. And then from verse 12, or in the first person, the teacher shows up. And this continues all the way to chapter 12. All the way through the book, you've got the teacher taking us on a journey, on an exploration. For the first 6 chapters, the teacher is exploring, not just making a bare naked statement, oh, everything's meaningless. He's wanting to demonstrate that by his journey. And so he's taking us on a journey. There's a sort of a summary statement at the end of chapter 6. And then from 7 to 12, we have, again, in the same tone, for the same purpose, observations about the world, observations about life the teacher's giving us, what he's noticing. Now I want you to flip over to chapter 12, verse 8. You notice something different at the end. We have something similar to what we just heard. Verse 8 of chapter 12 says, meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. We got the summary again. We got this voice describing the teacher. It's not like I said, it's meaningless, says the teacher. Everything's meaningless. So we have this person describing what the teacher did. Verse 9, not only was the teacher wise, but he imparted knowledge to the people. As we go through the book, you'll get a sense of that. Verse 11, very important verse. The words of the wise are like goads. It's the old word. They're collected sayings like firmly embedded nails given by one shepherd. They're meant to prod us. So these challenges, these questions of this wise teacher are meant to be, I don't like that question. That's what it's meant to do, to move us in the right direction. Look at verse 12. Be warned, my son, of anything in addition to them. Be warned, my son. So we have actually a description of a father exposing his son to the wisdom of this old teacher. See what's going on? My son, he's saying, my child, you need to hear this wisdom for you to live well. You need to be exposed to the prods and the challenges of this wise man for you to be prepared for life. That's actually the setting. That's why the book is doing what it's doing. That's why the teacher's asking these questions. That's why the teacher's going on an exploration through all of life. It's so this young person actually can begin to understand what wisdom looks like, can begin to actually weigh up what's the point of my life? How do I see life? How am I going to live? And so the best way to understand this book is to realise it's going to give you questions rather than answers. In fact, it makes more sense probably rip it out, put it at the front, ask you all the questions, and then you read the Bible for the answers. Because that's sort of what it's trying to do. This teacher, as it says, is a bit more like a discussion leader. He's prompting you with questions, and his aim is to take your approach to life for a test drive. So you're all philosophers, right? You actually all have a way of seeing the world, a way you think things should be. Well, he's going to take that to its logical conclusion. He's going to continually say, well, what do you believe? Okay, well, if you believe that, if you thought this is what that logically means, he's going to do that all the time because you need help with this. Most of us do not have the spiritual guts to ask these sort of questions of not just life, but our life. What's the point of your life? How is your approach working for you? What have you got to show for your life? And one way to reflect on this is the public transport test. You ever been on public transport next to someone and say, hey, how are you? What do you do? Oh, yeah. Who are you? You know, what have you done? And have you done this and you share to someone something important about your life, your story, your achievements, and they're like dismissive. They could care less. You might be a really young person, you think, hey kid, I've given birth to 4 kids. Who do you think but you can actually be left in a bit of a quandary thinking, oh, maybe my life isn't as meaningful as I thought. Because you've got someone else dismissing your life. Woody Allen said, the universe is indifferent, and so we create fake worlds for ourselves. We exist within the fake world. It's meaningless, but it's important that we create some sense of meaning because no meaning exists. That's Woody Allen. You might go, oh yeah, well he's the funny pessimist. But sometimes after a public transport conversation, you can feel like, oh, what is my life all about? Is that all I've got to show for it, that conversation? What you have here, I don't believe, is a pessimistic teacher in despair. I think he's resigned to things, but he's trying to teach us things in that resignation. But we have a rigorous thinker. In our culture, we have a lot of doers, but not much meditation and reflection. Most people in our society are just doing things. And so it is such a gift, that we're asking questions of life. So there's the setting. That's the point of really the purpose of this book. Now I want us to look at what we're given here. It says the words of the teacher. We're given like the person who put this together, the son of David, king of Jerusalem. Now, I don't know if you're like me, you grew up thinking, okay, we're talking about King Solomon. Sounds like Solomon. Smells like Solomon. You know, he talks about wisdom. He was a wise guy. Some of the things reflect his life. It's very interesting that the name Solomon doesn't appear anywhere in the document. Unlike Proverbs and Song of Songs that we know is clearly attributed to Solomon, and his name shows up very directly there, but there's a little bit of mystery about the way the writer is introduced, and it's important to notice. If you've grown up and you think, I believe Solomon wrote this, that's fine. You're going to end up in the same place anyway if you listen to what he said. But you might actually trip up because what we want to encourage you is to bring your brain to the Bible. You don't have to throw it out the back door when you're trying to, and you think, oh, that doesn't make sense. I thought it was Solomon, but it sounds like maybe it's not Solomon. Well, actually, most people think it's not Solomon. Most people think the obscure way he's introduced and various evidence in and outside the document say that the writer is taking on the persona of Solomon to teach some points to us. So I want you to notice some things. The association with Solomon only lasts to chapter 3 and then it's dropped. Nowhere in the book is it kept from chapter 4. And there's things said specifically, chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 8 and 9, and so on, that actually don't make sense if Solomon was the writer. They seem like that doesn't work. And for our purposes right here, I want you to just notice chapter 1, verse 12, the first statement of the teacher. He says, I, the teacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. Let's reflect on this. How does this work if it's Solomon? I, the teacher, was king. It's using past tense to suggest there might have been a time in Solomon's life where he was no longer ruler, but able to sit back and reflect on what it was like ruling. But the history books aren't going to allow for that. 1 Kings 11, go read it. Solomon dies as ruler. He didn't abdicate his throne. He didn't give it up to anyone else. There was no season in his life where he wasn't on the throne ruling, pondering about his rulership. That never happened. Verse 16, it says, I myself have surpassed in wisdom to all those who've ruled before me. All those who? My dad? He could have been talking about the Jebusite rulers who were their enemies. So what? That doesn't make sense again. And so there's a dominant agreement. There's also a lot of agreement this could be Solomon. But a lot of people think this writer is taking on the persona of Solomon to teach you a point that if Solomon in his explorations couldn't find satisfaction and meaning, then no one could. That's part of the point. And the name teacher here in Hebrew literally means one who assembles. One who assembles, one who gathers the ecclesia, the people of God. The ecclesia, the word Ecclesiastes comes from that. It's the Greek translation of this word teacher. The one who gathers, assembles wisdom, who brings the people together. And so you have this image of people gathering to hear the wisdom of the teacher, right? That sort of makes sense. And so it's very important that you don't get too fussed about if you think this is Solomon, that's fine. You follow his teachings, you'll be in the same place if you think it's not. But I want to be careful that you read the Bible wisely, that you don't just go, and not think. It's our tendency not to think, let alone ask questions like this of our life. So the next thing we're given is his conclusion. So we've got first word, the words of the teacher, son of David, king of Jerusalem, and then it says meaningless, meaningless. Everything's meaningless. This is important that we reflect on that word meaningless, because we have this important relationship between how you interpret this word and how you understand the book. Because the meaning of that word is dependent on the meaning of the book, and the meaning of the book is in large part dependent on the meaning of this word, right? So they inform one another. And we have to think about this. And I want to expose something that's very common in churches, sort of rampant, and you might have heard it from people like me, doing wrong things with interpreting. Now, there's a thing called illegitimate totality transfer, where people take a word out of a text and they go to the dictionary and find out all the range of its meanings and then read all those meanings back into the text everywhere the word shows up. And you just can play games with this, right? You can have whatever meaning you prefer of that set of options in any time it appears. And that fails to recognise That language is contextual. Every word comes in a sentence, in a paragraph, in a document. And so this is a very common problem here. And you'll notice I have a disagreement here with our Bible study books. We have a discussion book that's a very good one, it's wonderful, it's helpful, but it's suggesting that the meaning of the word in this text is one of its plain base dictionary meanings. So if you look up the word hebel, for the Hebrew word for meaningless, that we've got in my version, meaningless, it's going to say breath, breeze, vapour. That's like the base meaning of the word. And so our Bible study book says, look, Psalm 39, it says our days are but a breath. They're a vapour. You know, like you put out the candle and that little, that's it. And so there's nothing wrong with the possibility of Psalm 39, verse 5, using this word metaphorically for breath. The word is used mostly as a metaphor all the way through. In our book here, it's used 35 times. It's used 32 times throughout the rest of the Old Testament. And if you want to discover what it might mean here or anywhere, you've got to start doing some research. How is it used everywhere? This is very important. So when it comes to, say, those 32 times everywhere else, 13 of those, it refers directly to idols. And when it does, undoubtedly, it's saying they're useless, they're empty, they're meaningless. And the parallel descriptive words in all those 13 occasions are words like false, worthless, vain, lying. So the point of to start with, the reference to idols is not temporary. It's that they're useless, they are pointless, they're worthless. So you're asking yourself this upfront question, what's the writer mean? Does he mean everything is meaningless or everything's temporary? What's he mean? And when you go to all the other options of this word outside of our book, you've got just a handful, literally around 5, and Psalm 39 would be the clearest, where it could be temporary, transitory. It's obvious with idols, the central issue for Israel is that they're not temporary, they're an ever-present issue for them. Because idols are useless, so don't trust them. That's the point of all those texts. But in these other 5, or this handful, what's interesting is the parallel words, again, talk about emptiness and meaninglessness. And I'll just jump to our famous one, Psalm 39. It says, help me number our days, and my life is like so short, it's like a breath of vapour. That the very next statement in verse 6 of that same psalm gives you a conclusion. If your life is a vapour, verse 6 says, then any endeavour is pointless. Any endeavour in verse 6 of Psalm 39 says is vanity. That's sort of the conclusion of our writer here, isn't it? So I would put to you that the main meaning of this word in our book is meaninglessness, futility, uselessness, pointlessness. Some people say absurdity, but I think that's the weight of his argument, that's the weight of his use, and that's the point of his taking us through this journey, to challenge you with the point of your life. The brevity of our life is an issue that's brought up through Ecclesiastes, but the dominant, I think, meaning of the word is meaningless. This is important. So what's he getting at here? Why does he say everything's meaningless? There's an Aussie band called The Killers. Have you heard the band? It's a contemporary band, and they've got a song called Rut. Here's some of the words in it. It says, don't give up on me, because I'm just in a rut. I'm climbing, but the walls keep stacking up. Like I'm in a rut, but I'm climbing, trying to get up, but the walls just are always stacking up against me. And this is what the book's about. This is what this word means. The frustration, the meaninglessness of no matter what I do, how hard I climb, nothing changes. His first point is nothing changes. Look from verse 4 with me. This is the flow. Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises, the sun sets, and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. The streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. The place the streams come from, there they return again. And verse 8, all things are wearisome. nothing changes. That's why his first conclusion is everything's meaningless. Why? Because no matter what I try, nothing changes. And it adds a level of frustration to our life when we have songs like, you can fly, you can touch the sky, you can do anything. Because you can't fly. You jump out of the plane and give the thing a go. And Philip Yancey says this leads to flattening of emotions, numbness to pain, because you go, hold on, I thought I could do anything, but no. It doesn't work. Nothing changes. I can touch the sky. Right? So that's actually problematic when we actually sort of think around things that way. And the old church father Jerome, or dead church father Jerome, he said, what an irony here in verse 4. What's more vain than this? Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. He says, that's an irony. Think about it. The earth was made for humans, but it stays. Humans who are the lords of the earth, they actually dissolve into dust and become the earth. That's an irony. Nothing changes. And so here we have, I think, the setup for our big question. There's a lot of important questions here he's going to ask us, but verse 3 is really one of the central questions for you through the book. And this will help us probably the most tonight. There's other very important questions here. This one's used 10 times. But it spans the thinking across the entire book. And I want to read verse 3 to you and just get you to sit under the question. What do people gain from all their labours at which they toil under the sun? What do people gain from their labours? What do you have left over? There's a sense of resignation to the whole chapter. Actually, when you get to the last verse, he says, the more you learn, the more you experience of life, the more nauseating it can get. It does make you more sick. Verse 18, he says, more knowledge, remember, the more grief. So what's the point? This question will expose the foundation of your life. What's the point of your life? What's the purpose of all your labours? This is such an important question. The teacher in verse 3 is saying, look, you're very busy. You are very busy. You're working very hard. But what are you trying to accomplish? What have you got to show for it when it's all said and done? It's a huge question. And it's more important than you realise. So, for example, live conversation in the room. If I ask James, tomorrow afternoon, can I get you to go down to the corner of Queen Street and Chamberlain Street and just stand at the intersection for 4 hours and not talk to anyone? Will that be all right? Maybe, I don't know, 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock. No. Oh, not even a question. So I'm saying, James, can you please go and stand there for 4 hours and just do nothing? If James, okay, he's going to say no, but maybe if he'd even give me a moment, he'd probably say, why? Thank you. Right? That's why we say, why? I'd say, well, you don't need to know why, mate. You just need to go. I need you to go there for 4 hours and stand still. James is going to say, look, I'm your friend and all, but why? What's the point? What is the purpose of standing there? What is to be gained from standing there? And the writer's saying, if you will ask that question before you say yes to something for simply 4 hours one afternoon, are you willing to ask it of your entire life? What is the point? What is to be gained from your approach to life? What is left over? The word gain is an economic term. It means profit. What's left over? What is of permanent value left after you've finished doing everything? That's the question. If you don't ask this question, you're going off instinct, and it makes us more like animals than human beings. And here's probably the most helpful thing along with this question. Verse 3, what do people gain from all their labours at which they toil under the sun? This phrase is here all through the book 29 times. That's a lot. 29 times this phrase, under the sun, sort of frames the question for us. He's basically saying, the most important question to ask is, what is the point? What is to be gained from the way you do life if under the sun is all we have? Not above the sun, but under the sun. There's an old poetic way of saying, if this is all there is, if nature is all there is, let's suppose this is all there is. It's a very modern book, isn't it? Our culture, we're told, is the first culture in history to create a norm where everyone thinks the assumption is this is all there is. That most people in society would go, yes, under the sun, there is nothing above the sun. That's myth, but this is actually all there is. It's interesting to think about. This means it's the question. It's such a modern book, it's an important question though. You see, if you're on a sinking ship and there's absolutely no other way about it, the sink is shipping and the captain comes to you and says, hey, I forgot to turn the urn off, can you go sort that out? Irrelevant question. This is the only question that matters. What is the gain? What is the value? What's left over? What do people gain from all their labours at which they toil under the sun? So he's not giving you the answer, right? You notice? He's framing the question. Do you guys know the musician Bob Geldof? You remember the World Aid Tours? They started back in Wembley for Ethiopia and the AIDS epidemic. They made millions of bucks for that stuff. But straight after it was a high point of his career, or at the high point, and straight after the first set of concerts in Wembley, he turned to someone and said, is that all? Is that all? It became the title of his autobiography. Is that all? It's a very sobering question. What do people gain? Now, we started to wrestle with this with our Bible study group last week, and the guys came up with a couple of answers. This teacher anticipates all our answers. Our Bible study group initially said, oh yeah, this is our answer. How do we find meaning in life? If this is all there is, most people, okay, we live for the weekend. We live for fun with friends. We work for holidays. That's one way. That would be like pleasure, hedonism, if you like. The other one was, we all probably resonate with this one, trying to make sense of life. If this is all there is, we're going to try and make an impact in the world. That's what, as Christians, you really want to do. You want to make an impact, right? So it's another approach to life. Under the sun. In a sermon 30 years ago, Tim Keller identified those two, and another one, existentialism. It's like a way of finding meaning in life by saying, show me how bad it is, and then rebelling against the futility of it all and still living a courageous life in spite of it. And these first few verses challenge those three answers. Those three normal approaches of our society. Carpe diem, enjoy as much as you can, make an impact. This guy challenges that. If this is all there is, does that work? So let's ask the first question. What about making an impact? You know, you go to a funeral and you hear a story about someone and they enriched our lives, they inspired us. And you often think, yeah, I want to make an impact too. And so a lot of us think, I want to make an impact. Well, this writer is going to challenge you. Look at verse 11. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. You do good, you do evil, this writer's saying, who cares? No one remembers. Do you know the names of your great-great-great-grandparents? You might give a bit of money, they'll have a plaque, they might remember you for another generation or two, but no one remembers. He's saying, that's it. At the school at Broughton, I accompanied for the choir, and they were singing Les Mis songs last term. And you know, in the story, these students in one of the songs, they're about to give their life, sacrifice. And some of the lyrics say this: will there be anyone to remember me when I fall? Could it be my life means nothing at all? Is my life just one more life? And the writer's going to say, absolutely. That's it. You're just one more life. If this is all there is, if there's nothing above the sun, if there's no heaven, if there's no God, if this is all there is, the writer's going to say, you're just another life. It is actually, the writer's literally, the tone of the writer is saying, give me a break. Your life is like you're walking along the beach, your footprint's in the sand, you're near the water flows over it, and it's gone straight away. It's as if you hardly exist. That's how he describes us. So that's the first problem. He's saying if we try to find significance through making a difference in the world, he's saying no one's going to remember. Second issue is the issue of living for pleasure, to try to cope, right? The hedonist. And it could be momentous, you're going to suck the marrow out of life, or it could be just simple pleasures of life. If that's your approach, if this is all there is and your approach is, okay, we just got to eat, drink and be merry, that's the best way to do it. This writer's going to challenge that as well here. Let's look at verse 8. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. Hear this, the eye has never enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. No matter what you do, he's saying your soul isn't going to be satisfied with the everyday pleasure, even the momentous pleasures. Because your eyes, your ears, you'll never be satisfied. There's always going to be an ache for more. A weariness about what's the next thing. Even if you quell that feeling, it's still there under the surface nonetheless. He's saying this is actually really hard. This approach to life is really like the ostrich, C.S. Lewis says. It's like putting your head in the sand. The lion's coming, but I'm safe. That's really his approach. I'm just going to enjoy myself and try to forget everything else. And C.S. Lewis says, how do you enjoy life? How do you smell a flower, paint a painting, hug a child, fall in love, without that reality poking through that I'm just grown-up germ. I'm just an accident. If this is all there is, how do I enjoy those things? So that's one approach, but the writer clearly says it sort of doesn't work because you'll never be satisfied. He compares it in the verse before to a river. Verse 7, he says, all streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. That's what your heart's going to feel like. I'm never satisfied. It's never quite enough. And the last approach, the existentialist approach, which he challenges, it doesn't work either. You know, this idea that, okay, it's all a pitiless life. Okay, if this is all there is, and we just won we won the toss of the dice of the universe, we're human beings by accident. I'll admit all that, but I'm still going to make a difference. I'm still going to live with courage. The teacher actually has a sense of he's explored this. He says later on, I explored madness and folly. If you know the play Man of La Mancha, there's this sort of crazy character that everyone's asking, is this guy insane or what? Because he's sort of living in the face of reality, against it. This is a life saying, I'm going to find meaning by rebelling against the stupidness of life. That if this is all there is, I'm still going to make a difference. And verse 5 gives us this picture of nature. So I want you to notice, all the way through this first 11 verses, he's just looking at nature, trying to show us lessons from what it's like if we try to define meaning and significance as if nature's all there is. So he looks at nature. So verse 5, the sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. There's this idea of the sun that's hard to notice in the English that's a picture of creation that's tired. It's actually maybe that the creation is looking for some answers as well. This sense of the world gets tired longing for some kind of purpose, and really part of his point is if everything around you is screaming meaningless, if everything around you seems to have no point, if the earth is tired, the sun is just going back and forth, and you think there's nothing else happening here, how can you say my life has great meaning when everything around you is saying, no, it doesn't? Basically, he's saying, listen, if your origin's insignificant and your destiny's insignificant, have the courage to admit your life is insignificant. If your philosophy of life is, this is all there is, he's saying, let's be really honest about it. It doesn't work. It actually is meaningless. And I guess I want to ask you, are you willing to take your philosophy of life for a test drive here? In other words, are you willing to do more than just hear the headlines? The headlines of your life that you want everyone to see, or the headlines of other people's life, or you're willing to read the whole story. A news outlet called NPR, it feels like it's based in the States, but everything's digital now. You just click a button and you got it right in front of you. Probably about 8 years ago, they put out an article asking the question. The headline of the article was, "Why doesn't America read anymore?" Because they had this feeling that people are posting all these weird comments on our articles. They didn't think they're reading them at all. They're not reading our articles. They're just saying all this junk. So they put this article up, and when you click on it, it says, if you've read this article, please don't post anything to show that you've actually read our article. And as they predicted, everyone's just saying all this crazy stuff, demonstrating they just don't read it. But the challenge of this author is, are you willing to read your own life? Are you willing to allow the Bible to read the story of your life, the way you live it? Do you live as though this is all there is? Is that actually your philosophy of life? Everything under the sun, that's it? Or is there something more? Are you willing to read what's true? He says it is vain to try to seek meaning in life if this is all there is in life. And here's what's so amazing. He's framed the question in a way where we realise we have to look elsewhere for meaning. And when you go into the New Testament, the Apostle Paul in Romans is sort of channeling the book of Ecclesiastes. And when he hits Romans chapter 8, he actually uses the Greek translation of our word meaningless. And he says, when I look around, the creation is subject to frustration. That's the word, meaninglessness in Greek. Frustration, emptiness. It is groaning, it's frustrated. And he says, God did something to creation. He subjected it to futility such that we're going to have to look outside of creation for meaning that nothing can take away. And Paul goes on to say what's so amazing that the God over all creation that has purposes beyond us actually entered our creation and stepped into the frustration, stepped into the futility, stepped into the meaninglessness himself. The stuff that this writer is wrestling with. And so when Jesus showed up, John chapter 1 introduced Jesus as the Logos. The Greek word talking about the reason, the meaning behind everything showed up and became flesh and stepped into the emptiness of our existence. He stepped in to endure the meaninglessness. So God died. And Paul says, what's so amazing? I look around and it's not just creation groaning with us, it's God himself groaning with us. And you know what that means? That means every heartache, every tear, every struggle, every joy, every drink of water is now meaningful. There is nothing in your life because of that is meaningless. Because the creator of the universe stepped into the frustration himself. And so what that means is, see, before the writer has says, and you're going to hear this every week in some way. Every week in some way, these questions are going to lead us where we need to go. He has said, nothing means anything. But Jesus shows us that actually everything means everything. Not nothing means anything. So the next 5 minutes after our service finishes is meaningful. What you do in those few minutes really matters. It's not meaningless. It's meaningful. The simple fact that someone's cooked supper for us is not meaningless, it's meaningful. The fact that we've gathered to catch up with each other is not meaningless. It's not a waste of time, it's meaningful. What you do tomorrow, from when you wake up, when you have a sick day, when you have a hard day, when you have a frustrating day, none of that now is meaningless. Because God stepped into the emptiness. died in our place so that we might know him, so that we might have a meaning that even suffering can't take away. To remind us, like our songs are going to remind us that we sing, that there is a reality beyond this life, that everything, nature is not all there is. Pretty awesome book, eh? I think it's going to be very helpful to us to allow our lives to be read by this, to actually be prompted by these questions, challenged to think about, what is the point of my life? Why am I living for what I'm living for? What do people gain from all their labours which they toil under the sun? You know, when you ask someone how you're going, apart from the normal answer of I'm fine, which I said this morning, Aaron Coopers tells us means feelings inside, not expressed. I'm fine. My version of that is frustrated, insecure, neurotic and exhausted. That's my fine. But apart from that, well, most of the time we're saying I'm tired. Yeah, I'm tired. How are you? I'm tired. It's good to think about what is to be gained from all our labour. What are we living for? What's the impact you're intending to make? Remember, if Jesus came, nothing is meaningless. That's pretty wonderful. I'm going to pray and then musos come up and do your thing. Father God, thank you for the Bible. We ask that you would help us to pause and not just go on to the formalities now and not think. While we sing, Lord, we ask that your Spirit will be prompting us to reflect. What are we living for? What is the point? What are we trying to accomplish? Please help us be honest with others as we reflect on what's to be gained, what's left over after it's all said and done. And Lord, thank you for the incredible truth of the gospel, the way these hard questions prepare us to see the beauty of the fact that you actually showed up in the midst of the frustration, of the emptiness, of the meaninglessness of our life. To show us actually there's more than just this life. That under the sun is not the whole thing. So we ask God that you would help us to actually be drawn to you, the one who created the sun, the one who holds all things together and makes sense of our life. Pray that in Jesus' name.